Let's start with the governor's veto of the bill during the 2019 session that would have made changes to the system that you all are in, technically, how you would move forward. How did you feel about that veto? Did you expect it? And obviously what that means for the universities.
Well, House Bill 358 went through multiple iterations from where it started in the House, which was built on the 5 tenets that we'd worked on with House, Senate leadership, obviously engaging the governor's office. As any policy moves through the process, it changes. And as we got down to the last day, the last hour passing that bill, as the governor looked at that, he saw some things that were of concern to him, and so he expressed that in the veto message. While we would have liked to not had the bill vetoed, we understand that we want to try to do it right, and so our hope is that we can do that right in a special prior to July 1.
Right. So the governor said he would call a special session before July 1, since that is when the rates would go up for you all and for the quasis. So we're now in June. So, and the governor has presented his own plan, and now this week he said that he would make some changes based on some things the House wanted. What do you think of the governor's plan compared to what passed in 2019, and do you know what some of those changes that the House is seeking are?
I think that as you look at the governor's plan, it was in line with the veto message. I think he addressed the things in the bill that were relevant to the veto message that he put out. One of the things that was critical for us and an issue that I think continues to be something that's debated is employee choice, and the notion that a bill about choice, institutional, agency choice, employee choice, and can we preserve that opportunity for people to choose to continue participating in the system if an agency were to elect to exit the system. And so I think a lot of thought has been put into that. It is unprecedented as you look across the nation, and states are dealing with pension crisis from Illinois to Oklahoma to you name any state. Everyone's trying to come up with a solution to this problem. It is complex. It is difficult, and finding something that's sustainable and can support the pension system in perpetuity so that those benefits are there for those pensioners is really a critical component for us as an employer and a participating agency.
So let's talk about the impact, not only on you as like the universities, but also on students, on the communities that you all are in. A lot of people, when you start talking about pensions, they kind of tune it out because they don't think it necessarily impacts them. But especially if the rates go up, like we kind of mentioned, right now you're at 49%, this would go up to 83 or 84%. So what does that mean for the university, but also the community and the students?
Yeah. It is the single biggest threat to budget stability for the universities, and I would argue for any agency participating in the system. Even at 49% today, the market rate for retirement benefits for employees out there in central Kentucky, across Kentucky as a whole, somewhere between 13 to 17% is what an employer would be paying for those benefits in the marketplace. We're at 49%. Just for retirement benefits. That does not include their current health care coverage or any other benefits that we may provide. The notion that 49 is even within the market range really tells you how astronomical 84% would be and how unsustainable it would be. Looking at that for us, the increase from 49% to 84% is about a $10 million increase annually. For us to put those funds into the retirement system and not have a material impact on student outcomes. And really, that's the part that troubles us the most, is the fact that $10 million, or currently the $10 million that we're paying today, could be spent toward something that's going to benefit students. And being Kentucky's university, #1 for Kentucky enrollment, that really should matter to the Commonwealth, because we're serving the Commonwealth students. We're preparing that workforce. We're the fuel that's driving the economy to make sure that we've got a well-trained, well-educated workforce who can recruit business here so that Kentucky can grow the base, grow opportunity, and really say that we're a state who's going to lead in a lot of different areas.
So we hear a lot about tuition prices around the country, and we don't hear a lot about this pension problem playing into that. We've got some other things where people say, this universities need more state funding, but also, like I said, tuition prices are a huge talking point. So would this have any impact, if it's not fixed, on tuition prices?
Well, it requires a certain amount of money to run an institution. As you look around Eastern Kentucky University, we have a lot of fixed and unavoidable costs. We've got to pay the electric bill, we've got to pay the water bill, we've got to pay the gas bill. We've got to make sure that our employees do have benefits and that we can be competitive in the marketplace, because in higher education, the marketplace is global. Someone who's got the skills and talents to work at a university can work at Eastern, they can work at another Kentucky university, they can work anywhere in the world. And so we've got to be competitive. And I think that what we look at here is that we're seeing these escalating costs with no additional resources coming from the state, fewer resources being available to come from other philanthropic or other resources. That leaves really the primary driving revenue source for a university like EKU being tuition and fees. And so we can draw the conclusion as to where we will go if we can't get a handle on trying to hold some of these costs down and build a sustainable pathway for budgeting and services for students.
So let's talk about some of the criticism of this idea and this bill. People are saying, mainly people within the Kentucky retirement system, say if you let employers leave, then it's more debt to or less money coming into the system for the retirement system itself. What do you say to that, and what does it mean for someone to get out of the system at this point?
Well, I think there's some fallacies within the system itself. The assumption up until just a few years ago was 4% payroll growth every year was what was going to sustain the system. I don't know that we've seen 4% payroll growth in state government since the turn of the century. I can assure you that last year we saw not 4% payroll growth, but a negative 4% payroll growth in government. As you look at our institution, we took a look at the early 2000s. We were at nearly 1,200, 1,300 employees in KERS. Today we're 450. We have shrunk as an institution. Now, some of that is technology. Some of that is us continuing to become more efficient as an institution. Also, a big part of that are cuts and dollars that are just not available to provide those services. So when we look and say, so if you exit the system, you're going to leave a hole, the reality is every bill that's been passed said for someone who's going to exit, you're going to pay the full freight. A benefit that is owed to an employee yet hired, I think is a fallacy to think that we're going to miss out on serving those employees. As we look at the system, 11% funded, 12% funded, is it sustainable? I'm not an economist. I don't have a PhD in finance, but I can say it's really going to be difficult to get from that point to 80%, 90%, 100% without there being drastic changes, either in the benefit side or a dramatic influx of resources being pushed into that, and the employer cannot be the one to bear that burden, because candidly, we can't afford 112, 120% fringe rate for an employee in order to be able to participate in a system that is so much above the market rate for services. So when we say, is it fair for someone to leave, we're going to pay everything that's owed for those employees who are owed something. Barring that, we want to move forward, not putting employees into a system that we feel is unsustainable. And we think that's a moral and ethical issue.
So let's say they can't get this done by July 1. If they did it after July 1, obviously your rates will have already gone up. Could they retroactively undo that? And what's the worst case scenario in this situation? Let's just say over the summer. Mm-hmm.
So ideally, we get this done before July 1, so we have some certainty. It makes it very difficult to budget when we don't know what that rate's going to be. And when you're talking about a nearly $10 million swing, that's a lot to account for. So the thing is, with every payroll cycle, those dollars are going into the system. So there could be a fix post July 1. It could be retroactive. It could be going forward. But the reality is it's going to create a situation where some very, very difficult decisions are going to have to be made. And once those decisions are made, it's very difficult to unwind them. So it would be our preference that we get something done sooner than later. Our hope is that there's the will there on the Senate and the House and the governor's office to work together to find that solution. We've been in contact with all three. We continue to be very interested, very vested parties in this process, and we're very hopeful that they'll come up with a solution.
And from your perspective, from the university's perspective, what is the best, what would you like to see as the final solution to this issue that would be passed during a special session?
Well, I think that's evolved over time. I think that institutional choice is critical. So for each agency to make a choice about what their pathway forward is going to be a critical component. The ability for those employees who are vested in the system to have the ability to continue moving toward that benefit that they've worked toward is something that we'd like to see. We know that that's an issue of contention and something that ultimately the policymakers are going to have to make a decision on. Having a rate freeze for another year so that we can continue to really analyze what the actual liability is, put in place a financing structure if we were to leave, and then make an informed decision. I don't think, as I said, this is complex. It's new. There's a lot we don't know. As we look at KERS, a member participating system, tying the liability back to one entity is a very difficult thing to do, and it's going to take some time.
And obviously, with the proposal that you all came up with at first, that did not include the quasi-governmental agencies. When the bill first started, it did not include the quasi-governmental agencies. So, as long as you guys kind of got what you needed out of this, would you mind if the quasis are in it? You know, what does that do to the bill, in your opinion?
Well, it was a university bill. The budget cycle, there was really a legislative mandate in there that said for the universities, go find a solution, build consensus, bring it back. We did that. The 49% the rate freeze did apply to the quasis in the original version of 358, giving them the time to do the same kind of work. So for us, I think at this point we're all suffering from the same set of circumstances. I think it would be best for us all to find some resolution to that together. Each institution, each agency out there is going to have to make their own independent decision. It's not going to be one size fits all. So I think that a consensus approach is good, but if we have to tackle one sector at a time, that's okay with us as well.
Okay, so and not saying they're going to do this, but let's say that they come in before July 1 and all they did was the rate freeze. Is that enough?
I think that for us, agency-wise, it's enough because it gives us time to work on it. I think from a policymaker standpoint, what we've heard is that rate freeze without real reform is not real reform, and what we need is real reform in the system. So we're advocating for that real reform, but a rate freeze at this point in time would be something that gives us time to make the best decisions that we can make, both on the policy side, but also on the agency side.
Is there anything else that you want people to understand about this issue or know that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is this is a people-focused issue. These are individuals who we care deeply about at our institution, those who participate in the system. We want to make sure we take care of those who have that promise. On the other side of that, as we make hiring going forward, we want it to be into a system that's sustainable, something that we can make sure that those individuals have something when they get to the end of their retirement. And so for us, it's really focused on people. We want to service our employees. We also want to make sure that we can control costs for our students and for everyone else, and that we're here to serve the Commonwealth and do the good that we're supposed to do as an institution. And so that's the most important thing for us. And so we're hopeful that we can find a consensus position in the very near future that will allow us to do that.